Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hello friends, today we have a Nath of the Gilt-Leaf budget deck tech for you. Specifically, this is 2DH, meaning all the cards in the deck are $2 or under, with the exception of the Commander, who can be $5 or under. Nath is a 5 to cast 4/4 elf warrior that reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may have target opponent discard a card at random. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. The goal of this deck is resource denial, so you're going to try to just be constantly removing all the permanents that your opponents care about, also plucking cards out of their hand, giving yourself creatures, and then being aggressive with all the creatures that you play. Starting off, this deck has a lot of ramp. We got Rampant Growth, Farseek, Viridian Emissary, which all help us get lands to the battlefield early. Farhaven Elf, Cultivate, and Wood Elves do the same. Luckily, two of them are creatures, so those can allow us to attack if we have opponents that are wide open. Sometimes we might actually attack into our opponents if we can get death triggers off of them, or gives us little creatures that we can sacrifice to some of our universal SAC cards. Deep Reconnaissance, Far Wanderings, and Map the Waste all get us one land and have some kind of a side benefit. Far Wanderings might be able to get us 3 lands to the battlefield early. Deep Reconnaissance, if we don't have anything else going on, we can flash it back for 5 and cast it a second time, and then Map of the Waste helps to bolster one of our creatures, making it a little bit more threatening. More creature ramp, Wild Wanderer, and Ondu Giant allow us to keep attacking with our creatures, as well as get lands to the battlefield early. Nissa's Pilgrimage gets us 2 forests, 1 to the battlefield, 1 to our hand, but if we have Spell Mastery, we can get 3 forests, 1 to the battlefield, and 2 to our hand. Spell Mastery means we have 2 or more instants and or sorcery cards in our graveyard, which is not very hard to get, but we're happy to cast it on turn 3 without Spell Mastery as well. A couple of fixers, so these don't actually get us lands to the battlefield early, but they do help us get lands out of our deck, thinning our deck a little bit, and also help us fix if we don't have any swamps or enough forests. We can get those out of our deck with Sylvan Ranger, Borderland Ranger, and Civic Wayfinder. Also, side note, Borderland Ranger, I put in one of the older copies of him because I just really like the artwork on that card. So props to Jesper Edgesing for making a pretty sick looking Borderland Ranger. Our last fixer is the Yabba My Elder. When it dies, it gets us 2 lands to our hand. So any color you want, green or black. But you can also pay 2 to sack it to get those 2 lands, shuffle up your deck, and then draw another card. So a 3 for 1 on this guy if you can sacrifice him, which seems pretty good. We're running these 3 creatures with Death Touch, mostly to be threatening. We want to be attacking with them. They come down earlier. Our opponents don't usually want to block them with their important creatures, but they can also act as walls if we need them to. The Nighthawk and the Archer can both block flyers, and the Thrill Kill Assassin can't block flyers, but it can be a 2/3 if we unleash it, meaning it gets a +1/+1 counter when it enters, and we can only attack with it, which we don't mind because we want to be attacking with our creatures. Burly Bigs, we have the Desecration Demon. It's a 6/6 flyer that comes out on turn 4, pretty threatening. Our opponents do have some options with it. They don't have to allow it to attack, but if they choose to prevent it from attacking by tapping it down, they have to sacrifice a creature each turn, and the demon gets bigger, meaning they're going to continue to want to sacrifice those creatures to prevent taking that damage. Crash the Rhino Beetles, it's a 5/5 with trample for 5, which isn't amazing, but if we have 10 or more lands, which is not hard to do with all the ramp in this deck, it's a 15/15 trampler, which is pretty scary to be on the opposite side of the table from. And then Hydra Omnivore is an 8/8 that we like because if we can get one of our opponents to be open by getting rid of his creatures, we can attack in, and in a 4-player game, deal 24 damage 8 to each opponent. Critter Killers, Merciless Executioner, Slum Reaper, and the Fleshbag Marauder all enter and force each player to sack a creature. With Nath on the battlefield, we'll probably have Elf Warrior tokens that we can sacrifice, no big deal. So we'll just trade in an Elf Warrior for one of these guys, and then each of our opponents has to sack a creature, which is great value for us. Siphon Flesh also forces our opponents to sack their creatures and gives us more creatures to attack them with. Elders Reborn, as long as it stays on the battlefield, we're going to get our opponents to all sack a creature. They're each going to discard a card, and we're going to get something back from our graveyard to the battlefield. We have tons of creatures we want to recur, as a lot of the effects in our deck are enter the battlefield effects, such as Ravenous Chupacabra, which gives us some selection in our creature removal. When it enters, it kills a creature off that our opponent controls, and it's a 2/2 body, so we can keep attacking with all our creatures. Remorseless Punishment is really mean. It's a 5 to cast sorcery that says target opponent loses 5 life unless that player discards 2 cards or sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Then repeat this process once. So this really puts your opponents in bad position. Whoever you target with it is going to lose 10 life, or discard 4 cards, or sacrifice 2 creatures or 2 planeswalkers, or some combination of that mix. Usually it shakes out as they lose 5 cards, discard 2, or lose 5 life, discard 2 cards from hand, and sack a creature on the table. That's usually what I see. For 5 mana, that is a great trade-off. Butcher Malakir, a solid 5/4 flyer for 7 that becomes an immediate target for our opponents. Once he dies, each of our opponents is going to sack a creature. If we can sack our own stuff, such as the Yabba My Elder to it, then we're going to get extra value off of it, which is great. Reign of the Pit is a 6 to cast sorcery that forces each player, so this includes us, each player to sacrifice a creature, and then we get an XX black demon creature token with flying, where X is the total power of the creature sacrificed this way. So, worst case scenario for us, we sacrifice an elf, or some little creature. If everybody sacrifices a little creature, a 1/1, let's say we sacrifice an elf, everybody else sacrifices some small 1/1 creature, we end up getting a 4/4 demon, and our opponents all lost a creature. For 6 mana, this is a really good deal. It's flying, so it's going to be harder to block, and it allows us to keep the pressure on. Lastly, for creature removal, we have Ingaruk's Wake and Plague Wind, which are both one-sided. Board wipes just kills off all our opponent's creatures, so it should leave them open. We can get planeswalkers with Ingaruk's Wake, and they can't be regenerated with Plague Wind, so benefit on both sides. Just kind of depends on how the table is, but usually it's just destroy all the creatures your opponents control. Not a lot of planeswalkers in 2DH, and not a lot of regeneration. Tribute to the Wild is going to force each of our opponents to sacrifice an artifact or enchantment. Slice in Twain and Conclave Naturalist are each going to allow us to target an artifact or enchantment to destroy. The Naturalist gives us a 4/4 body to keep the pressure up, and then Slice in Twain allows us to draw a card and keep our hand full. Siphon Mind is going to further hamper our opponents' plans by forcing them to each discard a card. In a 4-player pod, we're going to be drawing 3 cards off of this because we get a draw card for each card discarded. Meteor Golem is a 3/3 that just gets rid of any problematic permanents. And then Torment of Scarabs is a 4 to cast enchantment. You got to play it on a particular player or target a player with it. And at the beginning of their upkeep, they have to choose to either lose 3 life, sacrifice a non-land permanent, or discard a card from their hand. So just further locks down our opponents. Whoever is most threatening, we can put on them, or if there's a particular opponent we're trying to target to get them out of the way so we can move on to our other opponents, we can cast this. And it just really sucks to be cursed with the Torment of Scarabs. Terastodon is just a big beater that gets rid of any non-creature permanents, so artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, lands. You can hit them with this. They do get a 3/3 elephant out of it, but usually you're only going to be targeting stuff you're scared of. You can even target your own permanence if it gives you an extra creature that allows you to swing in for lethal the following turn, but I wouldn't usually do that. And then Ulamog's Crusher is an 8 to cast 8/8 Eldrazi with everyone's favorite keyword, Annihilator. This guy has Annihilator 2, which means whenever he attacks, the defending player is going to sacrifice 2 permanents. If this guy stays on the battlefield, it's really hard because your opponents are just going to be losing their lands. So it's hard to come back from having any kind of Eldrazi with Annihilator on the table. He attacks every turn if able, which is normally a downside, but in this deck we want to be aggressive and keep the pressure up, so not really bad here. We're going to keep our hands full and keep pressure up by continuing to draw cards. Early game we can cast Abundant Growth on a land that helps us fix our mana and also gives us a card draw. Explore can help ramp us a little bit and draws us a card. Elvish Visionary is another body that we can sack to different effects, as well as draw a card from, or even attack into open opponents with. Phyrexian Rager draws us a card. We do lose a life off it, but we're hopefully having a fast enough game plan that one life loss doesn't matter so much. Undead Augur is a 2/2. He's kind of a new card from Modern Horizons, and he says whenever Undead Augur or another zombie you control dies, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So we don't have a whole lot of zombies in this deck. There are a few, or we can get some from our opponents from Siphon Flesh that we saw earlier, where everybody sacked a creature and then we got 2/2 zombies to replace them. But we're happy to just be aggressive with him. It kind of puts our opponents in a bad spot. Either they can choose to block it or trade block with it, maybe even, and prevent damage. But even still, we're going to be drawing a card off of it. So either way, it's bad for our opponent. And then Filigree Familiar is a 3 to cast 2/2 that when it dies draws us a card. It does gain us 2 life when it enters. We are less concerned with that. We kind of want it to die. We just want to attack with it. Gives us another creature to attack with, which we like to have. Elemental Bond, Colossal Majesty, and Seer Sundial are artifacts and enchantments that help keep us from drawing cards and give us gas to continue our game plan. Elemental Bond gives us a draw every time a power 3 or greater creature enters the battlefield. We have a fair number of those. Colossal Majesty gives us a draw on upkeep as long as we have a creature with power 4 or greater. Also not hard to do. Nath fits the bill for both of those. And then Seer's Sundial allows us to pay 2, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card off of it. So it's kind of like pay 1 if you count the land that you play that turn. So you play a forest, you can tap that and the one you had out from before. But anyway, these cards help keep our hand full, and they're also a little bit harder for our opponents to remove. Death Ritual is another enchantment that does the same, and also why we don't mind attacking with our littler things, because at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, we get to draw a card. So we're going to be drawing hopefully a lot of cards at least on our own turn off of this, and then if we can get creatures to die on our opponent's turn, that also helps us. Harmonize draws us 3 cards. Ancient Craving does the same, but we have to trade in 3 life for it. And then we have creatures here that give us cards. Kabu Climber and Masked Admirers give us a card when they enter the battlefield. The Admirer, we can pay 2 whenever we cast a creature, pay 2 green and return it from our graveyard to our hand, then recast it again to draw 2 more cards. So it can give us long-term value if we get multiple uses out of it. Also allows us to continue being aggressive, or if we need to, we can also block with it. Not a big deal because we can get it back pretty easily. There's a lot of creatures in this deck. Indulgent Tormentor further puts our opponent's backs against the wall. It's a 5/3 flyer, so big beater there with evasion. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we get to draw a card unless whoever we target, so target opponent, sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. So just choose the opponents that's in the most dire straits, and you'll get to draw a card usually off of this card, which is great value off of that. Soul of the Harvest is a 6/6 with trample, so good stats there. And whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card off of it. Staff of Nin draws us cards at the beginning of our turn, at the beginning of our upkeep. We also can tap to reduce our opponent's life total, which we're not going to usually do. We can hit Planeswalkers with it as well. but usually you're going to want to try to hit those utility creatures, those little creatures, so that on the other sacrifice effects, they have to sacrifice something bigger that is a little bit harder for us to remove. Mending of Dominaria is a great card here. Put it down for 5. It mills the top of our deck for 2, and then we can return a creature from our graveyard to our hand. Our stuff's going to be dying, it happens, and most of our stuff has an enter the battlefield trigger, so we'll hopefully be able to get something we can get extra value off of. We might be able to get 2 creatures off of it. And then the third ability we care less about, it says return all lands from our graveyard to the battlefield. Can help ramp us a little bit if we mill some of our own lands, or perhaps we have fetch land, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse in our graveyard, and we can get those back as well. Last card that draws us cards is Palaka Worm. It's a 7/7 trampler. Gains a 7 life when it enters, so that's, added bonus. But what we really like is that when it dies, it draws us a card. We're going to continue or keep the pressure up by attacking with this 7/7 trampler. Not fun, not fun for our opponents. Our land base is really basic. We have a lot of basic lands so that we can have our lands enter the battlefield untapped. But we have a few that do enter tapped that give us both our colors in Foul Orchard, Jungle Hollow, Golgari Guildgate. The Hollow gives us a life gain on enter as well. Golgari Rot Farm is our slowest land in that it bounces one of our lands. Whenever you play one of these bounce lands, you want to try to use the mana first. So maybe you have 3 lands out, you pay 3, you put out, your Borderland Ranger, and then you put Golgari Rot Farm down and return one of your already tapped lands to your hand. We also have Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, which help fix our mana base. Bojuka Bog exiles an opponent's graveyard, hit the person who's playing black, maybe green. Those are probably the 2 colors that do the best of this. And then we got 20 forests and 12 swamps. This deck's really fun to play or play against. One of my buddies in my play group has this deck, and it makes for a good time. The stats on this deck: it gets 5 stars for acceleration as it runs 16 accelerants, 4 stars for consistency with 19 cards that do that, 5 stars for control, and then it is speed-wise or stat-wise based on CMC on the slower end with 2.48. That includes the lands, but with so much acceleration, I don't really notice this deck or feel like this deck is ever playing behind where all the other players are at. Anyhow, if you like, denying your opponent's resources, taking away all their permanents, this will be the deck for you. Give it a go. Let me know how you liked it, or if you swapped in and out any cards, what changes you made. Also, my question to you is, what commander would you guys like to see next? Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Peace! Thanks for watching. You can help support this channel by hitting that subscribe button. This will help keep you up to date on content from Budget Commander. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video. Leave me a comment with your thoughts on this topic. And if you think someone else could benefit from this video, feel free to share. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you next time.